Hi, in this video I shall be talking about how to draw trees and plants in illustrating architecture, particularly in elevations or sections or in orthographic. So one thing to understand when you're drawing trees into your architectural illustration like a floor plan is to note where their positions are or possibly an existing tree. Now, trees are a naturally occurring thing, of course, in plants. And if you have like existing trees, you can show them in your floor plan and how something like an existing tree is integrated into your architecture. Tree on the corner here is actually existing on the site, and some tree proposals, like new trees, are indicated here, similarly to this. When you place in plants and trees, they actually have a psychological effect. So we're naturally drawn to nature, and trees are a natural occurring thing that you can incorporate into the design. So here I'm illustrating it in floor plan. And this is an example when I'm showing him in elevation or a section. Now, of course, illustrating them also gives a sense of scale and how your architecture is in size other than placing in people. It helps enhance the architectural illustration. And then here is an example of something that I was doing in isometric. Again, trees are also incorporated. Now, if you notice in my proposal, there was one big tree supposedly here. I did not illustrate that because I wanted to show the design here. And sometimes that's necessary. So rather than covering them, you might want to also just illustrate like in this translucent form of the tree so that, it's not in the way of the proposed architecture. And if you notice, I've also incorporated some form of plant boxes. One thing about trees is that they provide shade underneath. This design here, I wanted that tree to be there because there is a small sitting space here in this side of the cafe. It makes you more relaxed as opposed to something that is more concrete, and also decreases the temperature in the area. So it's a natural shade. It's psychologically good. As for the bushes or smaller shrubs, they're great also for directing traffic of people, blocking their way, giving a sense of a more natural feel to the space rather than so much concrete. Here I'm showing you an example of that corner design of this proposed building, where I was proposing to have some sort of taller types of small trees. Let's say this is going to be like the certain types of bamboo that I want. Probably I want them to be somewhere around here. To give some sort of nice feel when you're going through the path of this entrance. It's always nice to have a feeling of some sort of an arcade of trees, or in this case, bamboo. So now, how do you draw trees properly? So it's not always good to draw trees in a more detailed. And usually in architectural illustration, we just simplify them and gives this basic idea of a silhouette of a tree, for example, that is not overwhelming the architectural proposal or the architecture building itself. No? So an example of that is when we go back to the floor plan. I'm not going to be drawing all the leaves, for example, or illustrating everything, all the leaves, for example. I do not illustrate, but rather I just make a silhouette of the roundish outline of the tree in floor plan and some of the bushes. So these are actually planter boxes that I wanted to create or propose so that, the public space isn't going to wander off and spill over to this more private area for this private parking. So in elevation, again, I'm not overwhelming in terms of drawing every branch or everything, or drawing every leaf, for example. This would be a very dense inked area, and then my attention would be drawn more to the tree than the architecture. Here I provided some sort of a very light gray shade of this, just enough for the idea of a tree. So in this case, I am drawing in 1 to 200. So there is no particular sort of species that I was after with this, but it's actually good to have references from actual trees themselves. So for floor plans, again, no, as I mentioned, this is something very simple. So I'm just going to be showing you an example of how I'm going to be isolating this and show you what exactly did I do. So I put a dot where the center of the tree is supposed to be. It's sort of like where the trunk is. And I would draw like the silhouette of this. Now you notice that the line that I am using is not exactly solid, as opposed to something that's solid would be something like this. A better illustration of this would be something like this. So it's just a silhouette, a few solid lines, but then they are broken up by these sort of like dots and dashes. Now this looks better actually than something that's solid, that's roundish. Now this is more abstract, of course, than this, but this is like something more naturally occurring or naturally pleasing to see. Now you may see some people would be doing like the illustration of branches into this, but it becomes then a very busy space. This sort of like illustration, it depends where it's appropriate. For example, this one, I'm showing a space here, and rather than giving all the branches and showing all the branches here, I'd rather go for something that is with a thinner illustration of a tree outline. So you can choose like a thinner type of line. So I'm inverting my fountain pen to have a more thinner line, just the outline, and something that is with a thicker line. So this is just to note the placement of these trees, not to overwhelm the floor plan that I'm showing, because this is the intention that I want. So if I decide to place in a lot of these branches, that would be too much busy, and my attention would go to there. Next, for the bushes, in the floor plan, I would just simply create an outline of the plant box, for example, and would be just doing a silhouette of bushes or small plants. Now, of course, depends on how big the tree is. So this is normally what I use is about around 3 meters in diameter. Bigger trees, of course, have bigger diameters, and those are much older trees. So this is like a regular tree, and if I'm trying to create like and illustrate like a palm tree, I would just do the silhouettes of like more bladey. Something like this, and put a dot where the center of the palm tree is going to be. You can use pencil, for example, to first draw the circle for a cleaner type of line. So just give you that sort of guideline where to draw your thin lines in creating silhouettes of the tree. Now this sort of like would require a bit of practice, of course. That's how simple it is. For bushes again, also you could do the same thing with a pencil. You can clump in small circles as a form of guideline. And then what you do is you use a thin line and use the pencil as a form of guideline where these are. So you put points where the circular bushes are, and don't try to draw a lot of solid lines, but rather these small dots and dashes and U's and V's or inverted U's. So as opposed to something very solid, okay? So never use a very bold line type when you're drawing trees or plants for your architecture. So that's just a simple method in illustrating trees or plants in floor plans. So what about in elevation? For elevation, it's the same manner. Okay, so if I am going to say first illustrate a person as a scale, okay, this is like with a 1.5 meter eye level, and this is like the line where the plane is for the tree. I would usually avoid the leaves from reaching a person, so it's about roughly about 2 meters above up from the ground. So if this is a person, first I draw like a simple tree trunk, not too thick. Okay, don't go over and try to draw something that is a broccoli proportion. Draw about a 3-meter diameter, and then draw in silhouette. Okay, not necessarily all in solid, and put a bit of branches there. Put an opening and show some branches, but that's it. This is how simple you can create a drawing of a tree in elevation. Right now I'm doing things in 1:200. I just don't do trees as a standalone, and I sometimes complement the bottom of my trees with some bushes. Okay, so again, some bushes. Now, there are many types of trees that you can, or many forms of trees that you can illustrate here. The best thing that you can do is actually refer to the actual stuff. Like, for example, I'm going to be referring to some of the pictures I took, some real plants that I went through. It took a couple of years ago. And you could see, or of course you can download, or you can refer from the internet, but do cite where you're getting these if you're using those as references. But these are my own. So like, for example, this is good for bambusa, and you can see the scale of the tree. So a person's, okay, the eye level of this is here, so therefore a person is this tall, and it's really this tall. This plant is this tall. So do this. So if you could illustrate this, it's as tall as this. So you got a bunch of, say, there's a bunch of trunks for these bamboo. Like, okay, I'm not going to do this solidly. Of course, in the bottom, I would put some bushes. And then the silhouette would be, if I'm going to pencil this, would be something like that, more oblong. So pencil guide them first if you want. And then of course I'm not going to draw all the tree, the leaves. So I'm just going to draw some sort of fuzzy ball-like. So I'm not necessarily going to be very, very detailed. So the thinness of the bamboo trunks are so it's that's a person. And then if you're going to look at this, and if I'm going to integrate this into my architecture, this is what it's going to look like. So in scale. So my proposal was that for this design, I wanted to have a sort of bambusa here. So if I'm going to illustrate it here, I'm just going to do a silhouette, both sides, silhouette into the architecture. And you can see. So it gives this cue of what the bambusas are going to look like with the elevation. Of course, go do your research, like things like you can do palm trees, draw the trunk. It's very high, so sometimes it's that much high. So I draw a circle. I'm just going to draw the outline of that, and then the tree trunk itself. So a palm tree, not necessarily very detailed. So, and then you have a bunch of bushes, of course. Some are leafy types of plants, and some are bushes. So how do you do exactly a bush? Or say there's a planter and then you have a bunch of bushes. So you can always again refer to what's existing. Say this is a good reference, for example. So there's a smaller types of palms, then smaller types of bushes, put dots if under the shadow if you're trying to illustrate some sort of flowering parts of this plant. And nothing too fancy, just that. So normally I don't try to place in bigger trees or it's too overwhelming. I'm just going to be using medium types of trees to enhance my architecture. So in summary, in illustrating trees, keep it simple. Do an abstract version. Don't try to draw every leaf or every branch. Just simplify it. So it's as simple as creating an outline, do the branches, be in scale, of course, to a person. Do some branches, do some quick dashes and outline, have a peekaboo of a branch of a tree, and that's it. As simple as that. Put some dots. Okay. Do a bit of bushes underneath just to frame the tree. Of course, here I have not discussed about shading and shadowing these trees, of course, although that would help, but this is just a tutorial of sorts on how to make the basic outlines of a tree and how to integrate them to your architectural orthographics or your orthographic drawing. So I hope that you learn something in this video. So feel free to ask questions down in the comment below if you want to know more things about how these are created. And thank you for watching.